Rita, you want to go next? You want to
Yep,
take it from
I'm up.
Sarita? You
Sure.
are up.
I'm Rudy Khan. I'm the Restorative Justice teacher at Charles H. Bullock School. I've also been a teacher in Montclair for 25 years now. I taught math at Renaissance Middle School, also something I'm quite proud of. And my eldest, both of my sons are products of the Montclair school system and graduated from Montclair High. And when my eldest went to peer leadership and met Gail Shepard and had his RJ experience. And he shared with me what happened and what went what went on. And I was particularly moved by that. And I thought, what a wonderful experience he had, and how powerful it is for young people to be able to be in a space where they can hear each other and really listen to each other. And when Gail reached out to me and offered me an opportunity to be part of it, I leaped on it. So that's how I came to the restorative fold. The other part is that I did the 3-day training, which was it's 4 days it was for us, or 5. It was an incredibly powerful experience. And that also, when you embrace restorative practices, your view of behavior and your view of how children operate really shifts. And it creates a space in you to look at it all very differently. And it's also permeated into my own relationships with my family as well, which I'm very grateful for also. So that's what brought me here. And I absolutely, the work also reflects a lot of what I did as a teacher, anyway, as a math teacher, connecting to students, making sure that they felt safe, making sure they knew I was on with them, making sure they had a voice, making a space for them, whether that was at lunch at a separate time, and connecting. All about relationships, which is, at the heart of what we do. So that's how I'm here, and I'm very proud of the work we've done, that's for sure.
So I guess this is my turn. Hi, everybody. I'm Marcy Almeida. I had to say that I've been practicing restorative justice since 2018. But before that, my feeling was that I work with juvenile. I am the chairperson for the Juvenile Conference Committee, which is an arm of the court that instead of the kids going down to Newark to see a judge, they will see a group of volunteers from the community. And from there, I realized that punishment is not the right thing. It's not the right thing to do. It's conversation. It's reaching out. Why are you behaving that way? Making the child see that the behavior is not acceptable, not because of the law or the regulation. It's not acceptable because it's not healthy for him. Or her. So when I was offered in 2018, Gail Shepard invited me to join the group. I think I was there at 7 o'clock in the morning instead of 8 o'clock in the morning because I didn't want to miss one thing. And after that, I kept in touch. I've been doing that. I took another training, a short training one time. But my job for RJ Montclair is mostly to meeting with the Latino speaking, Spanish speaking parents of the community, Edgemont School. And then again, I was awakened by discovery that some of the parents realized they've been doing that in their country. They had that restorative justice in their country, but applying the same method of in your household, in your relationship with your parents, your kids, your mother, your husband, your wife, is the best solution because it shows you how they feel and how you feel about them. And you can reach an agreement with love and respect for each other, which is, I think, is the most important part.
Thank you. Maida?
I'll jump in. Yes.
Yeah.
Jida Zal. I'm a faculty member at Montclair State University in the Department of Teaching and Learning, where I work with future teachers, future educators, many of whom train as teacher interns within the Montclair Public Schools, but also go on to get jobs in the district or in surrounding communities. So RJ really, when I was introduced to the folks and Michelle connected me to Sarita and Gail, it was such an important opportunity to bring RJ into the fold, into the teacher education space. So a lot of the work that I do tries to center, as Marcia described, like what can we learn from community members? How can we disrupt a lot of the practices that we are utilizing in schools, which really don't work, which maintain the hierarchy of power and oftentimes lead to a lot of punitive practices. And so RJ provided that very concrete example that allowed us to not only disrupt punitive practices, but give my future teacher, my students who were becoming teachers, very concrete examples that lifted up all of the other elements of teaching that I want them to embody. So whether it's building relationships with students and families, recognizing and allowing young people to take up space and bring their whole self to the classroom, right? So really moving away from the idea that we have to leave whatever problems or issues we have at the door. That's the way many of teacher educators were taught, and many of the teachers who've gone through that system were taught as well. And so RJ says you get to bring your whole self to the conversation. And so my students post-COVID, as we were coming back together, we were still online, still keeping a distance. We had the absolute pleasure of having Robin Alvarado and Sarita Carrington participate and work with my students for the entire semester. And it was really transformative for all of us. It was transformative for my students as well, who went on to then embody a lot of the RJ philosophy in their own teaching practice. And so it's something that we continue to try to think about. How do we incorporate RJ in the teacher education space? And so Montclair has, as a district, has really been at the forefront of that initiative.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So as many as you know, Montclair's RJ initiative has really been deeply valued in our schools, shaping how we approach relationships, empathy, accountability. But with the recent $20 million budget deficit and the staff cuts that followed this announcement, important questions have been raised about what these changes actually mean for our students, educators, and the overall climate in our schools. So tonight's goal is not to place blame, but to listen, to learn, and to reflect, and to understand the impact of these changes, and really to consider what the future of this work could look like, moving forward. So I definitely want to thank our panelists for being here and your dedication to this important work. And I want to thank everyone in the audience for taking the time to engage with this dialogue and to attend. And so I really want to first start off with our teachers that are in the building, to talk about our work and its impact. And so could you guys who are in our buildings, whether it's, Hillside or Glenfield, can you describe what your restorative justice work looks like from day to day for those that may not know?
Sure. I'll go first. I'm in the elementary school, and my school starts with third grade and it goes up to fifth grade. And I know that people think that restorative justice is just sitting circle, and that's not accurate. We do so much more. I have students, as I believe Maida said, with severe anxiety, and they have stress. I have students who I have to meet at the door just to get them into the building, because they have a lot of anxiety and they need that familiar face. And so I met with their parents, I spoke to the kids. I built a relationship with them. So I can get these kids in the building sometimes even when their parents can't. And unfortunately, with this cut, when the parents found out that RJ was cut, I've gotten several emails. Hey, Dr. Rollins, who's going to help my baby get into the school, or who's going to walk them to class when they're crying and they're having these meltdowns? And I didn't have an answer for them. So my day starts every day. I block out the first period of me bringing in several students, sitting down with them, talking to them, letting them know that it's going to be okay. And I walk them to class and I sit down with them sometimes. And if they're struggling really, really hard that day, I go back and we do a thumbs up. How are you doing? Because it's about relationships. It's about building that trust. So many of these kids wouldn't even stay in school all day, but because they know that they can contact me and they have a free pass with all their teachers, that if they're starting to have anxiety, they can contact Dr. Rollins. And Dr. Rollins is going to go and talk to them, sit with them, give them breathing exercises, and letting them see a familiar face. So restorative justice is about making sure students feel safe, that they have strategies and someone they could go to that they can trust. So my day always starts out with getting the kids in the building, sitting down, talking to them, asking them about their night prior, and to see how they're feeling so that they can have someone that they can converse with and that they could build a relationship with and feel that safety that all parents want their kids to feel when they come into the schoolhouse. So before I even start my day, I'm getting kids off the bus and getting them into the building and showing them that love and that respect that they so much need and that familiar face. So I will stop right there as far as that part, because I think that is so important that parents and other people out there understand that we do so much more than just sitting circle. We are really forming positive relationships so that these kids can have coping mechanisms to continue with their day of learning.
I can jump in at
Yeah, I was
CHP.
thinking Rudy should go next with
Yeah,
elementary
yeah.
school, and I'll bring up career with middle school.
Well, I think fortunately, CHB is also kind of fertile ground for RJ, because there were mindful practices existed there, child-centered language and approaches from the teachers were part of the school. So it kind of fit really well. And what we brought was something that teachers could embrace. So my day starts at the door. I'm meeting kids as they come in, which I never realized how powerful that is until parents started saying, sending me a note saying, it really matters to my student that you greet them at the door when they come in. So that's the tone. That's what RJ does. And then from there, I sit circle with we're K5, so I sit circle with every class in the building over a 2-week rotation. It's hard because they have other periods. It's really hard to get some kind of schedule, but you end up having things being very busy. But what it does is that I know every student in that building. And I am not a disciplinarian, right? I am somebody that helps them make sense of things that are tough. Be it what's going on for them. Be it hard to believe at first and second grade, there can be deep relational problems. So it does get interesting, but we give them a language, right? But mainly at the heart of what we do is community building. The whole idea behind the restorative approach is that we build community so that if we are in a relationship, and you've heard this before, we're just a little less likely to hurt each other, right? So our circles, as Dr. Rollins alluded to earlier, we spent months writing circles, sharing circles, preparing circles, and testing them. And even when we met on those Tuesdays, we also had to prepare a circle for each other. So we were steeped in the practice. That in itself is what's at the core of what I do daily. So kids you go to CHB now, every student comes into that room, they know how to sit in a circle, they know how to use that talking piece, they know how to listen to each other. You know, the kindergarten circles can get a little hairy, but you know, that's something that you know, you embrace. Fortunately, I have a background in early childhood, so and I play the guitar, so it helps, right? So my day is that over a 2-week rotation, and we come back. But we also have smaller groups of children who, as part of a restorative practice, the implementation of it in a building, you create what's called an RJ team. And we have an RJ team with representatives from the disciplines, teachers, paras, school counselor, the principal and the vice principal in our case come to our meeting. And that is a wonderful time for us to also build community. But we also have a part of every discussion, what's called, it's just a name that we use. We call them our TLC students. They need maybe they need a smaller circle. Maybe they need a little more of an intimate setting to practice some of the skills, some of the relational skills that we're helping them develop. So we do that, and those students are identified at that RJ team meeting, where we say, so and so in 3rd grade is new to the school. They're having a little difficulty making friends. Maybe we can get them in, and of course you don't stay there forever. If you come and things are well, you move on, and we revisit it weekly. But what ends up happening is that everybody on that team knows that student, and the building is taking care of that student. And then we continue to develop that culture. I shared with Ms. Thompson with the earlier, we're starting again practices that we identified that have been useful at other schools. At those Tuesday meetings, we share them, right? We have that time to share. So one of the things was this idea of RJ ambassadors, where the elder students in the school would be continue supporting the work. So we had an application process for that, and what students said about the restorative practice and what it meant to them and what they want to do was really, really lovely. I hope we can share some of that later, and I think there's a chance for us to share a story, so I will. But yeah, that's what my day looks like. And on top of that, when there is conflict and something has happened, and the student has met with the principal, and there may have been some predetermined punishment or some repercussion for their behavior, not to use the word punishment, but and it's all very very meaningful. It's something that is not, you know, rubber stamped. The principal will then say to me, bring me into the conversation. Do you think you can help them facilitate a conversation between these two students? And that's where we'll have a restorative conversation. That's where we help them unpack some of what's going on and maybe why, and move forward. So and there's been lots of other things implemented, things that have come from Carissa Olivi at Edgemont School, the Peace Rose, where we've taught students how to use a peace rose to speak to each other. It's really very powerful, and we empower them to negotiate how they're feeling, and that in itself is the goal, right? Relationships that work and matter, and when it goes wrong, they have a way to address it, and that's kind of what my day looks like. And we've had some difficult ones, and we are at a pretty good place now as we start to turn the corner. But that's it.
Thank you. Ms. Carrington, I believe you are up next.
Okay, so I am the restorative justice teacher at Glenfield, and middle school is very interesting because I like to refer to it as the ground zero of bad decision making, right? because whatever bad decision is going to happen, it's probably going to happen between the ages of 6th grade and 8th grade, between the grades of 6th and 8th grade. So my day can take any number of forms. If I'm coming in on a Monday, we've had the weekend and students have had access to their phones all weekend, and I might add unfettered access to their phones all weekends. They may have posted on Snapchat or group chats or Instagram or whatever social media platform, and then there is some severe fallout that has happened that is now chasing them into the schoolhouse, right? It may not have occurred on school property or during school hours, but because it represents a substantial disruption to the school day, the school then has to deal with it. So I may sit with a group of students who were in conflict based upon what may have been posted on social media or in a group chat. Or sometimes in our physical education classes, you have students whose idea is, their play is Olympic worthy, and then others who are just trying to survive the day, right? And sometimes in the heat of play, tempers can flare and competitiveness, and then sometimes we don't know exactly what to do with that energy, and it can boil over in a negative form. So I may sit with students to be reflective about the choices that they made in that moment, and if they had a chance to do it again, what would they do differently? There's also circle work, because really 95% of the work that we do is community building, right? In an effort to shift the climate and culture in a building to one of inclusivity, right? Rather than exclusivity, and where people feel like they don't belong and not seen, right? Building the relationship is really what is important. So you're wanting to bring those classes together along with the adults who assist in those classes, because restorative justice is not just for students. And certainly it's not just for badly behaving Black and brown students, right? There's this common misperception, right, that this is what this is about. Restorative justice is for everybody, okay? It helps to build relationships, student to student, student to adult, and adult to adult. And that is how you begin to shift the climate and the culture in a building. So I mentioned I may be sitting in a conflict circle based upon what happened on social media, or a friend group got off the rails, and that happens. So those of you who have middle school age children or survived middle school because of your children, that this is the time when they're growing and exploring, and friendships are developing, and sometimes those friendships go off the rails. And what happens, because as adults we may think that, oh, maybe it's not so important, but it's so real to them. This is their world, and socializing is their currency. So I could be sitting in a conflict circle amongst friends. I could also be sitting in something that's larger, that involves students and their families, right? Because we talk about bringing in the community, and what are the supports that are needed, because sometimes our students need a little bit extra support. So what does that look like when that support comes from home and it's coupled with what is available at school, right? Then there are some times when I sit and have restorative conversations with students and teachers. And this is a thing of beauty, because it never existed when I was in school, right? There's this hierarchy of authority, and the teacher's word was the absolute law. But when both sides are amenable to coming to the table, I always say that everybody's on level ground here. Nothing that the teacher has to say is any more important than what the student has to say. And I sit and I help them facilitate a conversation, because sometimes it's a misunderstanding, right? The student may have the idea that the teacher doesn't like them, And often the student comes to the table saying, Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so just doesn't like me. And the teacher will say, that's just not true. I absolutely like you. There are some things that I wish we could talk about. Maybe there's some tweaks that I was hoping that we could talk about in class that would help you to show up as your best self. But I absolutely don't, dislike you. And having them have that conversation and hearing that your teacher doesn't actually dislike you when you've had that perception, or knowing from a teacher's point of view that this student is not out to get you, right? It just allows for a conversation. And that's one of the things that I am so adamant about. I believe everything begins with a conversation. I
Mhm.
stood in the hallway while I was teaching social studies for an entire year as the crazy woman who spoke to every single student who passed by. Most of them didn't know me because I didn't teach them, and they didn't really care to say hello, but I didn't care. Every day I'm at my post. Good morning. How are you doing? Your sneakers are so great. Your coat is cool. That's a really nice hat you're wearing. Just trying to figure out some way to connect with students. And after a while, it was like, all right, this woman's not going anywhere, so I might as well start speaking to her. And as time went on, I learned their names. I overheard conversations. I would stop them. How you doing? You went to visit your grandparents. How was your weekend? And then slowly they let me in. So if something ever happened in the hallway and I happened to witness it, they were more likely to actually stop and pay attention to something that I was saying, because I wasn't just an adult who was barking an order at them. I was someone who was actually concerned and took time to want to build a relationship and find out who they were. So my day can take any number of forms, but it all comes back down to, what is that relationship and leveraging that in order to help people show up as their best selves.
That's awesome. Lisa, earlier, you mentioned that a way that your RJ experience, it positively impacts your school community. When you mentioned the example of you bringing a troubled student off the bus, and that's one example of how we captured the positive impact of RJ in your school community. And Sarita, you just described your day of what it could be. Can you possibly give us a specific example of how a positive impact of RJ in a middle school community? I know this is a year when emotions run high. This is pivotal times for our students. Social changes are at an all-time high. So can you give a specific example so people can kind of understand what an example of a positive outcome of a particular situation? Of course, without using any specific names, but can you at least give us an example?
Sure. So seventh grade, in Glenfield, we loop our students, meaning that, we would have them in sixth grade, seventh grade, and eighth grade. And seventh grade was always the year that was the most fraught. It was my least favorite year to teach because it could just go from 0 to 100 in like 2.4 seconds, right? Emotions are all over the place. Hormones are all over the place. And it's just a very trying time. There was two groups of boys. One group identified as Black, mainly. One group identified as white. They had been friends, and they had common interests like playing football, doing athletics with one another. But at one point, there was a breakdown in their relationship, and there was a lot of racialized and racist language that was being thrown back and forth. And RJ was already established in the building, so they knew my role. We sat circle because everyone in Glenfield sits circle. It's nothing to sit circle. It's part of who we are. It's our practice. So everybody sits circle. So the boys reached out to a teacher and said, we'd like to go to RJ because we're having some issues and we'd like to, discuss this in an RJ format. And the teacher reached out to me and I was so touched because I mentioned that middle school can be ground zero of bad decision making. And there was any number of ways they could have decided to tackle this issue, but they wanted to come and deal with it in a restorative setting. And so we got the boys together. And over the course of 5 sessions, it went like once a week for about a month. We sat and we unpacked what was happening with them. And at the heart of what was happening was there was a breakdown in their relationship, and there had been some hurts, unexpressed hurts, but then they were piling on because they didn't have this, whether it was the language or they didn't feel like, you know, how do I express to my friend, this person that I'm calling friend, that what you said hurt me? But in that space, when we started unpacking what was happening and everybody started contributing to the conversation and the hurts that had happened and what can we do moving forward, by the time we were done, the boy said, it's over. Like, we don't want to leave. Thank you so much for doing this. We feel seen, we feel heard, we feel so much better. We're so glad that we had this opportunity. And we're sad that we have to leave. And I said, well, boys, it was like the end of the school year. I said, well, boys, I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere. And you guys are coming back as 8th graders. And just know, like, I'm here. I'm here to support you. And I'm hoping that we won't retread this territory, but just know that I'm here to support you as you continue on. And so I thought that was a beautiful sort of explanation of the restorative practice. Where harm had happened, they wanted to address it in a restorative format, and they came willing to do the work and really be vulnerable and show up in many ways that we don't allow our young men to be vulnerable in certain spaces, but they knew that they could be vulnerable there. And I thought that was just a thing of beauty.
Now,
And
Vinny,
no recidivism. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have used like a penal term, but they did not return back to the same behavior that, you know, brought them to the RJ space in the first place.
Vinny, do you have like similar, although it's a different it's a different age group from where you are, do you have a similar effect in your group, even though they are younger, but when the conflicts do come to your circle?
Oh yeah. You know, I have quite a few, but I'll give one that I think is just kind of sweet. But also, as Sarita was speaking, you know, RJ, you're listening to her quickly explain a process that took several weeks. It's slow, it's methodical, it is intentional, and it doesn't happen. You do this, you do that, and then it's fixed, right? So that's the other part. That's why the rollout takes years as you start to change the culture of the institution. So that's the first thing. You know, when you meet with two kids that are in conflict, you don't just put them together willy-nilly first and say, hey, work it out. There's a lot of groundwork that's done prior to it. I had so even, and it kind of, the idea that it oozes out. There was a dad that would drop their child off every morning, and I would always say hi, and the dad would never say a word to me, and I just kept going. Week after week. Hey, how you doing? And eventually he broke down and started saying hi back to me. And it got to the point where if I forgot, they reminded me. So you know, this is the shift in culture. It doesn't happen right away. People have got so much stuff that they're bringing to life, and they're carrying those big heavy weights. But had two kids. I believe it was third grade at the time. the mom called and wrote a note to the teacher and said this other student had said they were stupid, and if I could facilitate a talk. So I spoke with each of them first, and the first one, who was called stupid, I spoke with them first and said, we were in class and we were doing some math problems, and so and so said I was stupid. And we talked about how it felt, and then so I said, well, would you be interested in having a conversation with them about it? And he said, sure. And so I got the other student, and I said, what happened the other day? And he said, well, we were doing a math problem. We were doing math problems, and they were all addition. And I subtracted them all. And I said, I'm so stupid. And the other child overheard it, and you can put the rest of it together. But the lovely part was when I got them together, and the other child agreed to the conversation as well. When I got them together, and they sat down and they each explained, what happened. And the child looked at the one who had said, I'm so stupid, and they said, but you're not stupid, and it was just such a lovely, soft moment where I don't know, maybe it was just more to me that something that's just misinterpreted and given a chance to be corrected, and they were fine, and they were fine after that, and I have great relationships with both of them now too. So there's lots of those, and those happen all the time, and I think the goal is to have them be able to have that language as they interact with each other, right? So that's where we're at now.
Yeah, awesome. So I want to quickly pivot, and I want to pivot over to program funding and a little bit of context. And anyone, panelists, feel free to hop in here. Can any one of you briefly describe how the Restorative Justice Program is funded and supported in the Montclair Schools District?
Sorry. So we began as teachers on special assignment. And so when we were on special assignment, I'll take my example. I was a social studies teacher before I became a teacher on special assignment to do restorative justice. So when I became a teacher on special assignment to do restorative justice, someone else filled my role as a social studies teacher in the position that I just left. So the district pays, my salary and my benefits, but while I was on special assignment, someone else was in as the Miss Carrington's social studies teacher in the role that I just left. In addition to that, in order to do a lot of the work that we do in the community, whether we're having family nights or working with our community partners, our restorative justice team applies for grants from the National Education Association. It's called the CAPE grant, the Community Advocacy Partnership and Engagement grant, that we've received since like 2018. The NEA has pointed to Restorative Justice Montclair as a beacon and a lighthouse in this work. We've been nationally recognized, also supported by the NJEA. So we seek grants from the NJEA as well in order to carry on the work of community, because Gail Shepherd was very wise, even thinking about the day of the week when you're planning to have an event, the time, right? If you want parents to come out, what are you offering? Are you offering dinner? Are you offering childcare? Like, we are so intentional about having those things available because we really want events to be successful. We want the community to come out. But we know that if you plan an event at 6:30, it may be very hard for someone to come out when you have to feed your children and do other things. But if we say, hey, We want you to come out. We're going to take care of that for you. We're going to have dinner and we're going to have childcare for you so that you can, focus on the event. If it was like maybe it's a circle for parents and caregivers while their children are being watched by older students who are also supervised by an adult. So everything that we've done and we do is very, very much intentional because we're community oriented.
And may I add something there, Ms. Thompson? Having the RJ team go to present at the NAA conference, it was to no cost to the district. Normally, when school districts are having a physically hard time, they don't touch programs like, I should say, initiatives like Restorative Justice, who also brings money into the district, who brings recognition into the district. So we go beyond what other programs in the district may do, and so we bring in the recognition, we bring in other money. So to just put a little more a touch to it, when you look at what our salaries may be, that's one thing. Yes, that's one thing that the district pays for, but everything else, the district do not help us with. They do not help us with. And sometimes we even come out of our own pocket to ensure that whoever we're serving that day has breakfast, have lunch, like Sarita said. We make sure that we decorate, we do certain things. One program, we were up early at 7 o'clock in the morning decorating, just to ensure that the environment was inclusive to all and ensuring that everyone felt comfortable. And again, to no cost to the district.
And I think it's really important that you guys mentioned that this program, the initiative RJ, applies for grants, because I think that sometimes there's a misconception that the district is paying for every little thing. You guys have had, several successful events over time. I've attended some of your events. And so thank you for clearing that up and letting people know. Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead, Sarita.
I wanted to mention something because it feels right to mention it here.
Mm-hmm.
So in our early days, the district had some outlays for consultants so that there could be training. And we had, at a certain point, we said to the district, once we became trained and steeped in the work and had been doing it for a long time, we was like, this is something that we could take on ourselves. And we were finally able to convince the district to make a small investment on our behalf. So we called it's the train the trainer, right? So that we got trained, so then that we could then take over the training for the district. And then that would allow us to do the training. And then the district wouldn't have to bring on pricey consultants at tens of thousands of dollars. We would do that work in-house. We got trained. That training happened last December, so just shy of a year ago. And the first time we were able to put that into practice was in April. This past April, we had our first 3-day training where we took it on ourselves. And it was an amazing success. And we were primed and ready to continue doing that now that, the district, sort of put that trust in us to be able to do that. So that was really important to mention that, we were actually trying to think of ways that we could, save the district money and take it on ourselves. So
Not including also too, Sarita, the professional development that the district leans on us to do. And we've done it for free. And we've also did PD in the community for free, where we are no longer being with our families and our loved ones because we're out at 7, 8 o'clock at night, providing circle time for our community partners. And again, I got to keep saying at no cost to the district. So that's very important as well, because everybody knows that when we may have curriculum Thursdays and we're bringing in all of these consultants, well, you don't have to bring them in because now you have the RJ practitioners who's going to the different schools, and we're providing not just one PD, but we're doing 2, one in the AM and one in the PM as well.
And so that's a great segue into my next question. So how does funding or lack thereof affect this initiative's ability to support students, staff, and the school climate. And any one of you guys, feel free to hop in here.
So we came off of a really great year, the last school year. We ended the year, I mentioned that we had a 3-day training where we trained more people from across the district, supervisors, teachers, a cross section, paraprofessionals, a cross section of employees for the district. We also reignited our relationship with Montclair State University. Majida was so kind to give us that space during COVID. But we had a meeting with the dean, the associate dean, and a program director when we were talking about RJ, and they gave us a slot for professional development in their summer leadership conference in June. We were invited, the team went, did the summer leadership conference. From there, they said, we would love to put you on our fall PD schedule. And to which we said, oh, absolutely. Like, we live for these opportunities. And so we started the school year like buoyed by the way the year ended. Okay, we're going to start. We're looking to onboard Watchung. We had just finished onboarding Nishawayne. We, hit a wrinkle because, with the funding crisis that we're in, we were told that we weren't going to be able to have a teacher at Nishawayne, but we said, we understand that. There's a hiring freeze. We understand that. We are 8 plucky, creative individuals who can figure out how to support Nishawayne School and still work on bringing on the next school, which was slated to be Watchung. To your point about how, cutting funding would affect, we weren't even thinking about that at the time. We were trying to just start the year as we always have, meeting with our colleagues and devising strategies for supporting the schools in the midst of this fiscal crisis that we find ourselves in. And the one thing that was kept from us was the ability to meet with each other to tackle these issues. That didn't cost the district anything. And that was something that it was so hard to wrap, I'll speak for myself, it was so hard to wrap my head around that because it's what we've been doing since the inception. We come from 8 buildings, right? Each one of us would come, we would have one day out of the week that was designated to meet. Gail Shepard was our coordinator at the time, and when she retired, the district eliminated the coordinator position. But the district still expected the work to continue. So when Dr. Pons was alive, he wanted the coordinator position sort of distilled down. Candace Pastor, who was my co-lead at the time, and we sat down with a board member and our RJ supervisor at the time, who was still currently our RJ supervisor, and we went through the coordinator job description, and Candace and I said, okay, there's a lot here that Gail was responsible for. We cannot do her job and still be responsible in our buildings. So we went through the job description and said, okay, we can do this, not this, not this. And it was approved, and Candace and I became the co-leads. And so we would mentor the RJ teachers who were newer to the practice. So there was times when Candace and I needed to meet with each other to do the quasi-administrative work, right? Then the team would meet for about 2 hours or 2.5 hours on a Tuesday. There was this gross misconception that we met for a full day on Tuesday from like 9 to 3 o'clock and did nothing but meet. And that couldn't be further from the truth. We invited, hold on, Lisa. We invited our supervisor. It's we had an open door policy. Never once did our supervisor come to check in on us, to see what we were doing, because if he had, he would have seen a group of 8 people sitting around tables with laptops open, talking about how we're going to support each other in the buildings, what initiatives are working, what activities need to happen, what PD is being planned. And that was about 2 hours, a 2-hour meeting. Even departments get to meet, and PLC time is designated. But for some reason, a district-wide initiative that had 8 buildings, we were precluded from meeting. And nobody wanted to talk to us about what was undergirding that, just some amorphous notion that we were out of our buildings and nobody knew what we were doing. And my answer to that is, if you didn't know what we were doing, you didn't care to know.
And to add to what Sarita is stating also too, to also not cost the district any money, we supported each other's schools. Everybody knows that the high school is huge. And now that Gail Shepherd is retired and she's no longer in that building, the person who was there needed help. As we all know, that's a very huge building. I would go over on certain days. Sarita would go on certain days. We supported the other schools when called on. Again, at no extra cost to the district, because other people are getting stipends. We were not. So we did this out of the goodness of our heart and because but we believe in what we do. And so again, I have to echo what Sarita said. We've invited several people to come over from central office and they did not come. So if you don't know what we're doing, I agree with Sarita, you chose not to know. However, everybody sung our praises about the work that got done. So they know that something got done. So therefore, why would you take away our Tuesdays where we had the opportunity to meet? We would also discuss if we had a situation going on in our building. I could say to Riddy, hey, Riddy, you're in elementary. This is what I'm experiencing. What do you think? And we would put our heads together to figure out what's the best strategy to help our students and our staff. But again, like I said, we did this because we believe in what we do. We believe in helping our students and our community. And at not one time were we ever asked, how is this going to impact you if we take our Tuesdays, your Tuesdays away? We were just told, you can no longer do it. That's it. We don't care. Figure it out. Go speak via Zoom. And when I say, wait a minute, this is against our contract, we're still waiting for an answer. And that was months ago, and we still haven't received an answer on it yet.
Wow. That kind of like it moves me into my next question, because hearing you guys speak, it leads me to ask, what is most at risk for students and like the broader school community if this work is reduced or eliminated?
I
Well,
have
there's a lot of things. Go ahead, Sarita.
I have students passing by the RJ room almost daily saying to me, I don't want RJ to go. I don't want RJ to disappear. And I say to them, honestly, I don't want it. I don't want it to disappear or go away either, honey. I said, but I'm not going anywhere. Right. So what is being said, it's that connection. RJ has been a hub for connection for our students. And my belief is that I believe that a student should be connected to at least one adult in a building, whether it's a cafeteria worker, a secretary, the social studies teacher, guidance counselor. There should be at least one adult in that building where that student feels I could go to this adult and talk to them and tell them what's going on with me. So while I felt a sense of pride of the student saying that I don't want RJ to go, I believe that really at the heart of it was, you're somebody who sees me, and what happens if RJ is gone? Does that mean like you're not going to see me anymore? And I don't mean just physically see me, like you see me as someone in this building, not just, a kid running through the building, but you call me over, we have a conversation. If I don't look right, you're going to call me into the room and say, hey, what's going on? What do you need? What do you need? And so, people are already overworked. And I think that part of what's going to happen is you're going to place demands or expectations on a workforce that's already stretched thin and who may not even be equipped to meet the needs in this particular realm. We are steeped in doing this work. This is what we do every single day. We have partners in the work, but they partner with us collaboratively. If I go back into the classroom, as I'm slated to go back in January, I'll have 100 students of my, who I am responsible to. Right now, I'm responsible to the entire Glenfield population. And that takes on a very different, complexion, I think.
There's going to be some other key points, Ms. Thompson. One, I do believe suspension is going to go back up because the principal or the vice principal, and some schools don't even have vice principals, they're not going to sit and talk to the students like we do. So those offenses is going to continue. So we're going to have a higher suspension. As I stated, for those students who are having some form of trauma and it's hard for them to get to school, we help them come to school. Because as Rady said, we meet them at the door. I can promise you that attendance rates is going to go back up again. So there's going to be several impact to the student and how they're going to cope. Same thing for the teacher. I get calls every day. Hey, Dr. Rollins, one of my students is crying. I can't stop teaching. Can you come help this student? And it could be just anxiety over math. And I'll go in, right? So who's going to be there? And as I said, when I was speaking to the board members prior, who's going to help these children navigate these emotions? We have some adults who can't do that. And that was the beauty of restorative justice. We were having students be able to come and talk to us about some of their traumas, their fears, and we were able to work through it with them and get them back on track. You cannot keep adding more and more responsibility to the classroom teacher and then expect instruction not to be impacted. So instruction's going to be impacted. As I said, attendance is going to be impacted as well as suspensions. So I would like to hear what the board's going to do when we say we're going to educate the whole child. How are we going to help those students? And who's going to fill in those shoes when we all go back into the classrooms? Because we three are the last three. We go back into the classrooms come January 1.
Marcia, how do you think that this affects you, this angle? How does this hit you?
Oh, I see that an increase on the cases that I will be seeing, because a lot of the kids, they won't have any way of resolving their issue, their personal issue, and they will start fighting in the street. And when they start fighting in the street, they get apprehended, and then they go to us, which is a sad thing. But I have to say something about what Ms. Carrington was saying. Last spring, I had a conversation with a child, and she was having problem with the substitute teacher in the classroom. Because she, according to her, she wasn't teaching what she was supposed to be teaching. So I said, so what did you do? I went to the principal, and she said, oh no, we went to see Miss Carrington. She helped us. And that's the RJ contact with the student, that the student felt that they would be closer to see her than instead of going to the principal. They have a relationship already established. And that's something that we're going to lose. And the sad part is that we're taking away the empathy, responsibility, conflict resolution that lies behind the classroom. And we really, as a community, we should ask that RA is there. The RA is there. So, I mean, it's really, it's a big loss for the community, because the kids learn, like an issue, and they started learning about the body bench, that they can talk to each other in that body bench. That's the way that RJ is working there. And in each school, they have something that they were looking forward to do, and they help the staff, they help the teacher, they help everybody.
Maida, how
So
does this affect your collaboration?
I think removing, this kind of work from the school, as others have described, we are as a community in a very tense time. And I think the children are going to mimic what is happening among the adults. And I think more than ever, it's critical to have RJ holding that space for students. But how it's going to affect, I think, our collaboration and our work is that, it does move away from something that we're trying to legitimize, right? A practice that we're trying to ensure that future teachers take up as something that is the norm as opposed to the exception. And so I think that's part of what the loss is, I think, for us on the teacher ed side.
And so for those that may not fully, like, now previously did not fully understand RJ, how would you explain why this work is essential and not optional in a public community, in a public space, public education space?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think going back to what are the alternatives that teachers are given when we talk about how do we disrupt punitive practices and teachers' approaches um, to addressing student behavior we know that the norm is punitive, that it is about removing children from classrooms, sending them out, sending them down to the principal, taking them away, sending them home, taking them out of the environment rather than figuring out ways to support them in the classroom or finding support that isn't about going to the principal's classroom. I think that taking that away means that, we focus and re-legitimize the practices that are about punishing and trying to, correct students' behavior, address students' behavior through punishment rather than by learning about each other, by building relationships, by caring for the other. So it just moves all of our practices, I think, in a direction that is not one that we want to continue to promote.
Sarita, I saw your hand up for this. Did you have a response?
I did. I just wanted to say that the board professed and professes RJ as a goal, but never once did we sit down with any board member to map out how they wanted this goal met. This was all grassroots by the RJ practitioners. So I wanted to say that. I also wanted to say
That's surprising.
it would be surprising if you have something that is a professed goal, but you never actually, come to the table to say how you expect this goal to be met or what your expectations are. I know that is surprising. The other thing that I would like to say is that back in 2023, when the community was coming together for these community conversations, and the charge was if budgets were no issues, and I know that's, utopia, I know that's utopic thinking, but the charge was if budgets were no issue, what should the Montclair Public Schools look like in the year 2028, right? So this was about freedom dreaming, right? When the parents and the community came together, we had 9 breakout groups that had to report out about what they wanted the Montclair Public Schools to look like in the year 2028. 6 of the 9 breakout groups all said that they wanted RJ fully implemented within the Montclair Public Schools by the year 2028. Now, the strategic plan is now into 2029, and there's a whole nicely laminated poster size 11 by 14 poster that sits in front of the copy machine in my building, and I'm sure it's above copy machines in many of the buildings across the district. But RJ was important enough for the community members to come and say, this is what we wanted. This was not Sarita Carrington going from table to table saying, you know, you guys have to mention RJ, right? You know, you have to mention RJ. I had nothing to do with it. I was in one breakout group, right? But 6 of those 9 breakout groups said that they wanted RJ fully implemented within the Montclair Public Schools by 2029. I also just want to briefly say that we had been making such great strides post-COVID, getting kids to come together for meaningful in-person, face-to-face conversations and being with one another. And what does that mean to be with each other in spaces, off screens, dialoguing with one another, learning about each other, interacting with one another. And I just fear that the gains that we have made will be erased.
Mhm.
Can I,
Oh, hop in, Michelle, please.
is that all right?
Oh, yeah.
You know, this conversation is so sad and enraging. I've been in Montclair a long time, and I've watched beautiful educator generated innovations that speak to racial justice, educational justice, connection with community, reduction of discipline, curricular development rise up. We document it, they become national models. One of the jokes is Montclair is the place where teacher generated innovations are born and get murdered. And so to watch another kind of collective innovative obituary, let me just offer a few images of the power of RJ. The educators have spoken about the student level work that they've done, which is just incredible. They've done work with teachers, they've done work with parents, they've done work in community, they've done book groups in community. They went through when Gail and Petal were here, they went through the board policies, looking through the disciplinary practices, raising questions about what's insubordination, how are we defining that? We know that nationally, that becomes a place where racial disparities are very high, not on property damage, drugs, weapons. There are usually no racial disparities. Insubordination is tricky. So we did a deep dive. They followed the young people into out of school suspensions. They worked on a curriculum for out of school and in school suspension. They held meeting with parents. And I remember one mother's an African-American woman, she had 2 little boys, maybe 1st and 2nd grade. And it was in the years of Trump won. And she said, you know, it's already affecting my Black sons. They're feeling the kind of racism rising. And I love RJ because I know they get to lay their blues down before they come home. And then a white mother followed her who had a middle school son and said, I'm worried that I'm losing my son to the internet, that he's just getting sucked into it. And I love RJ because once a week, he's making eye contact with other young people, and they have to look into his soul and he has to look into their soul. I know we've gotten letters from kids who graduated from the Montclair schools who were trained as peer leaders, who were bringing restorative justice to their colleges.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we've worked with the courts, with the police, with Marcia. I know that each of us has brought RJ. I brought it to South Africa from everything I learned here. I brought it to conversations at CUNY around Gaza and student protesters. So the tentacles, the capillaries of RJ are so rich in Montclair. It's like it created a mycelium layer. You know how we're all discovering how mushrooms are going to save us? A layer of mushrooms that feed us and allow things to grow. And it was really the early brilliance and vision of Gail Shepard, Petal Roberts, and then the amazing work of Sarita and Candace and many others. To watch it be dismantled now without anybody, and Sarita, correct me if I'm wrong, did someone come to you and say, too expensive? This is
vital to our soul. It is vital to the district, but could you cut it by 20%?
No, Michelle, working in Montclair is like being a part of the worst game of telephone that any grammar student has ever engaged in, because the information, if it gets to you, it's bits and pieces. No one has ever come to us, but we've read things that have said our model is not sustainable, right? And again, I will say, I understand that $20 million is
A lot.
It's a lot.
almost insurmountable. I totally understand that. But I also feel disrespected because at no time has anyone said, what can we reimagine? Can we keep the heart of RJ, but reimagine it to be something else? And what could it possibly look like? To not allow stakeholders to come to the table and have a voice when we hired on the basis of somebody that has a background in this work feels hollow, right? Especially if, we had a conversation that said, like you said, Michelle, what does RJ 20% less look like, right? We didn't even have an opportunity to do that. And that's what really hurts probably the most, because if we are nationally recognized and our work has been touted in the Montclair local for contributing to the suspension rates come down, then surely we could be trusted to have a conversation about what the future of RJ could look like in Montclair without having to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
So my 3 dystopic quick endings. One is I'm afraid school districts are much more likely to trust corporate models than educator-generated models. And Montclair has been a district where we keep popping them up and smashing them. And so my second dystopic worry is that, Riddy, I remember when you were helping to build Renaissance, right? And I remember when teachers were building the 9th grade curriculum, and that I still have this little girl hope that Montclair's the place where teachers get to generate innovation, but I don't know why they would trust it now. If RJ, which has been so remarkably successful, feels like it's been undermined. And my third dystopic point is that we're living in a time of authoritarianism. There are children in our schools who are worried that their parents are going to be picked up off the streets. There are children in our schools who are being denied SNAP funding. There are teachers who are getting pink slips. There are paraprofessionals who don't know if they have a job. If we ever needed restorative justice to help build a culture of care, a philosophy of accountability, and dealing with harms and holding each other, it's now. And so I certainly hope I'm a Jew who wants to believe in resurrection. So yeah, I certainly hope there's some possibility of restoring, but RJ has been vital to the organs and to the heartbeat of Montclair, and it would be a tragedy to dismantle it.
I agree. I 100% agree. And I think that also in this climate that we're in right now, this initiative is needed. As a Black mother, it's very disheartening for me to see an initiative like this and people who are trained in what you all are trained in to be dismantled. And I say that for so many reasons. I have kept my son from wearing hoodies for years. And this year, I maybe about, within the past year, he's wanted to, up his fashion and wear hoodies. And I cannot tell you the fear that sits within me watching him walk out the door every day to walk, 15, 20 minutes to the high school, you know, and you, Sarita, you mentioned that RJ is not just for students, but when I'm shopping with my high schooler, he doesn't understand, you know, the anxiety I'm getting when he just wants to buy a regular black Nike hoodie. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't understand that. And there are some students within our schools that don't understand why their parents may be under stress, especially if it's a black mother that's, you know, part of the thousands of other black women that have lost their jobs in the past, you know, several months. So there's a lot of different layers where your initiatives, your training, your education, your compromises in your community would be it's vital to so many of our existence. And it's very disheartening to see that none of this was even considered when the evidence is just right in front of our faces of how it's needed. And so I fear that there's a breakdown. There's a breakdown coming if this work is not sustained, if it's not continued. And so I want to ask you guys, do you know if are there any ways with your experience, um, is there a way to continue elements of RJ even with limited staffing or limited resources? Because I know you mentioned, you know, no one came to you and said, "Hey, what can we do?" You know, it doesn't sound like anyone came to you, looked at your successes, looked at where you started, and looked at where you are now. Looked at who has come to you for success and leadership. So, with what you know and what you've done, is there a way to even provide any type of elements to RJ with these limitations that have been placed upon you?
Can I just say, Dee, that something that you just said, which was so powerful. So I thank you for sharing, about you and your son. It's for me. I feel, and as Saritas, I could speak for me. I feel misled, and I feel like we were lied to when we were first told that we have this huge deficit and da 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 da, and there were going to be a request for the community to come in. We were told that, okay, hold on, we're not dismantling RJ. So we were hopeful that if the families came out and they voted yes, that RJ would still be here. I found out, how the kids say, through the streets, that even if 2 votes of yes came through, RJ was still being dismantled. So what are you saying about this wonderful initiative, as you're stating, that helps so many people? It doesn't matter if we get the bailout, because obviously they've counted us down to zero. And so, to answer your question, I don't know how we can continue this work when the person or the persons who are sitting in that driver's seat don't see our importance, because, as Sarita said, we're never invited to the table. Regardless if we get bailed out and receive the loan, you're still saying our initiative is no longer. You've already placed more than half of us back into the classroom. How do we do this work when you've cut us off at the knees? And here's the most disrespectful part of it all. You didn't even have the respect to call us back into the office and say, here's where we are now. We have not heard from our immediate supervisor. We have not heard from anyone at the board. We have not heard from anyone in CO. And so when you say that, I have a lot of visions that I would love to do, Ms. Thompson, in order to make sure that this work stay alive, because it's so important to the whole community. But how can we do that in the seats that we're sitting in when no one in central office is talking to us? And so I see Sarita's hand.
I just want to say really quickly before Sarita, I get to you. I just don't want this to become just another domino being knocked down by the trend that we're seeing it culturally.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Sarita.
Making sure I wasn't muted. So the 3 remaining schools are Glenfield, Hillside, and Bullock. This is a district-wide initiative. As long as it remains a board goal, it's a board goal for an entire district. So the fact that 5 of our colleagues are back into their buildings in different roles, even if these three people, Dr. Rollins, Riddy, and myself, remain, it's still a district initiative. It's not a building initiative. So until the board decides that RJ is no longer a board goal and the strategic plan needs to be, retooled or reformulated, it would be very hard to carry on a district initiative when you're working with a skeleton crew. Now, we are plucky and we are determined, but our numbers have dwindled, and an initiative that is already, it's already been an uphill battle from its inception. You're collapsing just the remainder of what could be. So there's been no conversations at all. There's been no appetite for any conversation. I really just want to, I know I'm going to put a finer point on this, and I just have to, because I really need the community to understand one thing. When we were called in and told on October 6th that our positions were slated to be cut, right? It was revealed on October 7th. We were told on October 6th. We were told that decisions that were being made could be rescinded based upon how the community voted, right? However, our colleagues were being put into the classroom in November. November certainly comes before December, before the public even had an opportunity to vote yes or no, whatever the community wanted to do. So I'm having a really hard time understanding how decisions can be rescinded based upon a vote when you've already put people in positions, and you're not going to disrupt those people who are currently in those positions. It's just not going to happen. So there's a level of disingenuousness that's been happening, and there's been a level, this transparency that is being bandied about. It's anything but transparency that's happening. And I really need the community to understand that, because I said in my remarks, even if Montclair were to win the Mega Millions jackpot, RJ is being dismantled.
And to add injury to that, we were told, and she's mentioned it several times in her community conversations, that those who touch students will be the last that she touched. And I disagree. We were the first to be touched. And there are some key positions in central office that do not touch children, but yet they keep their positions. And I could ramble them off, but even just recently, to add injury to harm, okay, there was a contract signed for the current BA for $500,000, okay, in this last board meeting, okay, and as well as the attorney for over $300,000. And there was no talk or discussion about, let's send out an RFP so that we could get someone cheaper so that we could save the district money. No, they brought them in as a professional development for the district, and these two were able to get these hefty contracts, but RJ gets put back into the classroom. We were the ones who were touching everybody, but yet and still those questions haven't been answered. So for me, it's such a slap in the face. It's so disrespectful, and we've been asking the questions, the right questions, but no one's answering us. When your own supervisor will not return an email, something's wrong. What is that? They're causing so much harm. And I just have to say, for my colleagues who I'm sure who's watching right now, they went back into the classrooms disheartened. They did not want to go. They wanted to continue this work. They wanted to stand side by side with us and to work this thing through, but they were told no. They wrote letters, they called, they asked the union for help, and no one came to their help. So they had to do what they had to do in order to keep the job so that they wouldn't be on for insubordination. And how sad is that? Because nobody heard them out. After all the things that we are attempting to do in this community, nobody would hear us. And so I have to say once again to Dee Thompson, thank you for this platform, because nobody else would hear us. No one else cared to say what's going to happen to the students in RJ other than you and a few others. So I thank you for this platform, because without this, our message wouldn't be heard. So thank you so much for what you do.
Of course, and thank you all for what you do. I have, one final question as we're coming up on our time. I know we're a little bit past, but this was a really important conversation, and I thank you all. Tonight's conversation was just an important one, not just about, restorative justice, but about the kind of, community and school culture that we want to build and that we want to have. What do you want? If you could leave attendees with just one final thought or message about the future of RJ and Montclair, looking at what we're facing right now, what would it be? My hope is that this message and this conversation moves somebody, whether it be those at the top, parents, community members, board members, and just understand that we are in a very fragile climate right now. And, it is going to hit everybody. It doesn't, it doesn't matter, what you believe in, what culture you are, what race you are. It is going to hit you in some way, whether that be your child picking up something that they're hearing at school, something that you've been harboring yourself, fear, like I mentioned before with the hoodies. It's going to hit every one of us in some kind of way. And I just believe that in this climate that we're in right now, and clearly it doesn't seem like something like this is going to clear up overnight. Things always get worse before they get better, and I'm afraid of what it looks like if it's worse. But if you could leave attendees with one final thought, a message about the future of RJ, what would it be from all of you? Sarita?
So Gail Shepherd brought restorative justice to the district after serving in the district for decades and seeing the district not do right by children over the course of many decades. And so I would say past is prologue. I would say that we're going to return to when things were terrible, and when Gail was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and RJ became a ray of sunshine that was in the district. One of the board members, when we trained some of the board members in RJ, one of the board members said, RJ is like sunshine in this district, and we need to have more areas of sunshine in this district. So I fear that we're going to go back to the attitudes, behaviors, and the outcomes that led Gail to bring this initiative to the district.
To echo on to what Sarita is saying, I feel like more harm is going to be done. It's rumored that a watered down version is trying to be implemented. And that scares me, because the one thing that I was told by Sarita when I decided to take on this task, it must be done with fidelity and it must come from your heart, right? When you force people to do something that they don't want to do, then we all know the outcome. It's not going to be done well. Children are going to be harmed and relationships are going to be broken. And I'm just so fearful that we are going to go backwards. As Sarita said, we are Montclair. We were the people who people come to. You don't even understand how many districts have called us to say, hey, can you teach us how to do what you do? Okay. For them to sweep that away and to take that away without any other thought scares me. As a teacher who's now going to have multiple kids in my class, because now classroom sizes are going up. I'm scared. I'm scared for the students. I'm scared of the burnout that the staff is going to experience. You can't put this all on the counselors. They are wonderful people, but they're being cut as well. And you can't keep overtaxing them. Most schools only have one, so she or he can't be everywhere. It was finally working. I love my counselor who I work with. We work very, very well together. And I fear for the children who are coming in with anxiety. I fear for the children who are coming to school with medical conditions, phobias. It's real. And so I don't know who's going to continue to help those students with those mental breakdowns. And that scares me. That scares me. So I think we're going back to what I call the dark ages, where people with no voice don't get heard, children who don't have certain resources don't get helped, and then teachers are overwhelmed and they're going to leave the profession because they cannot handle all of this into the classroom.
I guess I could leave, I'll leave it in terms of what is lost. So as I alluded to earlier, we had students applying to be an RJ ambassador. And the question was, why do you want to be an RJ ambassador? And I'll read you one response. It says, RJ lessons have helped me so much during my years at CHB, from learning how to treat each other to dealing with myself being teased and made fun of. I would love to spread the amazing experience of sitting circle and sharing with others in a safe space to others. I have attended CHB for 6 years, and every year I have witnessed bullying, conflict, people being left out. I don't want any other student to go through that. I also love the meditation component of RJ, which inspired me to do my own daily restorative meditation, which has helped me a lot with my anxiety. This is why I'm applying to be an RJ ambassador. That's what you lose, right? That what we've been building.
I want to tell the community how lucky we are to have amazing educators in this town. You all live through crises, you live with betrayals, and yet you rise. Quite amazing. Thank you, Riddy, for that. But really thank the three of you and your colleagues who now have pink slips attached to their souls. Thank you for holding strong for the young people, for the community, and for a world not yet. And thank you, Dee and Marcia. I love you. It's always beautiful to see.
I want to say a little something. Even if the money is tight, even we have mismanaged our money, because that's the problem. We must invest in empathy, accountability, and healing, because that's what heals the community. So, and I also wrote a little circle for the Board of Education, which I won't share with you, but it just said the same thing, that they must be transparent and respectful, because I don't think they're being respectful to the teacher. I don't think they're being transparent to the community, because something is going on and we don't know what it is. That's it for me.
Thank you, guys. Conversations like this really remind us that, progress begins with awareness, and awareness grows through listening and understanding. And I know, like, the discussions like this comes in the wake of, difficult budget decisions. You know, the values behind restorative justice, empathy, connection, accountability. I feel it's still very much alive in this community, and it's up to us to really carry those, those values forward. So I encourage everybody to just stay informed, stay involved, and just continue these types of conversations beyond tonight. If you guys, have any questions and you want to have a conversation with me, I'll put my email in the chat. Or you guys can reach me on social media via my website. It's deethompson.com. And hopefully this conversation just moves the needle a little bit. And you guys can definitely reach out to me at any time. I'm really glad that we were able to provide this forum for people to really understand what it is you do and the hearts that you guys hold. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Everybody.
Have a
Really
good night,
appreciate
all.
you being here.
Night, Sarita.
Good night, all.